Hello and welcome to Context. I'm Anastasia Lavrina. Tonight, we turn our attention to a crucial diplomatic development in the Caucasus. On July 10, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan met in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, for a highly anticipated bilateral meeting that has captured broad attention. This meeting is being held as a potential turning point in the ongoing efforts to normalize relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, two countries that have been locked in conflict for decades. And now the leaders' willingness to come together and engage in meaningful dialogue signals a shift in approach that could reshape the future of the region. The normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia could have profound effects not just on the bilateral ties, but also on the broader South Caucasus region, which has long been a site of geopolitical tension. The leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia have agreed to continue the dialogue and further practical negotiations, particularly focusing on the contentious issue of border delimitation, where progress has been slow but promising. Confidence-building measures designed to create a climate of trust and mutual cooperation are also high on the agenda, as both countries aim to reduce the risk of future escalations and foster a peaceful coexistence. But beyond the official talks, the question remains: what do these negotiations mean for the citizens of both countries? And perhaps most importantly, can both nations move beyond their history of conflict and establish a new era of cooperation? Tonight, we will be exploring these questions and more as we unpack the potential impact of this diplomatic moment. Joining me now is Associate Professor Orkan Valiyev, Head of Department of Khazar University in Azerbaijan. We're welcome to our program.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's a great pleasure to be here to discuss this.
Thank you very much for joining us. So let me start with a question. President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan's meeting has been widely regarded as a potential turning point in the relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia. What exactly makes this meeting different from previous attempts at dialogue, and why are so many people watching this particular moment closely?
First of all, I have to mention that it was no surprise, and because the process started right after the Second Karabakh War by the initiatives of Azerbaijan side in 2021 and 2022. And the concrete answer, the simple answer to your question should be the mention that it was the mediator-free talk between Azerbaijani and Armenian leadership. So before that, yes, we witnessed the bilateral relations between the foreign ministers and let's say representatives of the Azerbaijani and Armenian leaderships. But it was the first the bilateral meetings without any the third intervention. That's why it can be identified and historic the meeting, or maybe, as you mentioned, the turning point in terms of the peace negotiation between Azerbaijan and Armenia that would facilitate establish and secure and peaceful environment in the South Caucasus, which is very, very important in the 21st century, uncertain time. Another thing is that the meeting can be understood in terms of, say, from uncertainty to certainty, because it's a political will, specifically in terms of the, let's say, Armenian the Prime Minister. But there was quite an historic point, because as we know, Azerbaijani leadership has been insistently stressing importance of bilateral meetings, direct dialogue, one-on-one meeting, and its importance in terms of the peace agreement. So that's why I think that's the main issue, the main, identification of this. The meeting is the mediator-free talk between Azerbaijani and Armenian leadership.
But could we classify this as a full-scale and full-fledged interstate format between Azerbaijan and Armenia?
Yes, it's possible, because As you know, according to the press release issued by the foreign minister, the two sides discussed important issues. For example, one of them was the border delimitation, which is quite important, and also the constitutional issue in terms of the Armenian constitution, and any other the critical issues that which is quite enough important in terms of the peace negotiation, peace agreement, and needs the one-on-one or let's say direct dialogue between two sides without any third intervention or mediation or facilitation, because mediation or facilitation could be an obstacle in terms of the peace negotiation process, because history in terms of the original global context, shown us that in order to get the peace, the sides need to direct dialogue. So that's why it can be said that yes.
Well, you refer to the statement spread by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Azerbaijan Republic. But the statement refers to the outcomes without, as far as I recall, mentioning the question of initiating of the draft agreement. Earlier, you were given to understand, according to government sources, that among the issues discussed, there was a specific reference to the initiating of the peace treaty. What do you think the statement from the foreign ministry does not mention this?
Yes, because, you know, from my perspective, the meeting was alone quite an important turning point. That's why it's important to focus on the meeting, bilateral meeting, because as I mentioned before, it was the first time that Azerbaijan, we witnessed the bilateral direct without any mediation or facilitation, let's say, the meeting was in terms of the high level of leadership at the Azerbaijani and Armenian side. So that's why I think that it's quite enough important turning point. That's why we focus on this, this meeting, which would, promote, let's say, the practical work in terms of the respective the government commissions, in terms of, let's say, border delimitation or constitutional amendments and any other issues. That's why, from my perspective, this meeting quite enough importance that we should focus on this issue.
So, one of the key areas of focus during the talks is border delimitation. This has been a major source of tension between the two countries for quite a long time. What makes border delimitation so complicated, and why is it crucial for both sides to address it right now?
As we know, actually this process started the foreign minister's 5 articles proposal in 2022, which includes quite enough constructive proposal for the future of the peace negotiation process. That included the border delimitation as well. I think it's simple. First of all, Azerbaijan prioritized the border delimitation, which is based on international law. And second part of this issue, the Armenian constitutional amendments in terms of the Armenian constitution, because as we know, there's a concrete the articles regarding the territorial claim was Azerbaijani territory, which is recognized by the international law and also the part of Azerbaijan. So that's why this is the main issue, needs to be clarified, needs to be discussed. But I think that, as I mentioned before, the bilateral meeting would promote the practical works in terms of these issues. It will be able to involve the respective state commissions, the government commissions, in terms of this, border delimitation or constitutional amendment, something like that. Of course, Azerbaijan is clear and unchanged the requirements, and it's understandable because Azerbaijan is just prioritized its national sovereignty over its territory, and there is an uncertain issue, the threat from Azerbaijan Armenian constitution. This is a main issue, but I think that this meeting would promote the technical, practical the work in terms of this issue, which will include the state commissions.
It was a direct talks between two countries, which makes an exception in comparison to what we have seen before. But given Russia's historical influence in the region. How might these rapprochements signal a shift in the balance of power in the region, particularly in relation to Russia's role?
First of all, we need to understand that the unipolarity lost its hegemony, not in terms of only the global context, but also in the regional context as well. And it's not for the South Caucasus, but the globally. So that's why it's not the possible to how to keep the unipolar hegemony in the South Caucasus. So, and also the Second Karabakh War has changed this the unipolarity in the South Caucasus. First of all, Azerbaijan became the state in the South Caucasus and proved its capacity. So that's why, and becoming the key, how to say, the middle power in the South Caucasus. And also the Second Karabakh War, after the conflict situation, involved the different, how to say, the institutions and countries to the South Caucasus. For example, Turkey is one of them. So that's why it's not possible to how to say the focus the former unipolar the hegemony in the South Caucasus in terms of Russia. So I think today's meeting, the bilateral meeting, has changed this how to say the status quo in terms of how to say mediated-based discussion process and peace negotiation process in terms of Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Can we say that Russian participation as to the subject of the opening of communications in the region, namely the Zenazer corridor, for example, has been decisively removed of the agenda?
Yes, Zenazer corridor has been discussed and was one of the issue of the meeting. And first of all, it needs to be clarified that Zenazer corridor, not just how to say the issue of Nakhchivan. No, first of all, it's not to be understood that Zenazer corridor will be the issue of the cooperation and integration among the regional countries in terms of economy that will foster and promote the economic growth in the region. And it seems that, yes, Armenian leadership, Armenian government understood this issue, this privilege. That's why the issue was discussed. But second part, of course, the second part of the Zenazer corridor will be, of course, the issue of Nakhchivan and the mainland, Azerbaijan. But the first issue of the Zenazer corridor, the integration and cooperation in terms of economic economic relations. So, which is quite enough important. It has been mentioned by Azerbaijani leadership right after the Second Karabakh War in the early of 20 and 2021 that the Zenazer corridor will be able to involve all parts. I mean, the 3+3, and will be the win-win situation in terms of economic integration and cooperation. And today's the bilateral meeting that proved that, yes, the Armenian leadership understood this, the process, this issue, this benefit, the possibility of the integration and cooperation in terms of economy, which is quite enough important for Armenian economic situation. So this is what we need to understand. We do understand regarding Zenazer corridor.
Coming back to my question, so you think that Zenazer corridor, its opening and the future cooperation, it's also an issue to be discussed and solved by two nations, two countries, without involvement of the third parties, including Russia?
Yes, quite enough important, because Abu Dhabi meeting was a historic meeting without any intervention, including Russia and any other the third parties under any the organization, etc. Because as we know, the Azerbaijani leadership, Azerbaijani side stated its importance repeatedly at different platforms. And then they came to Abu Dhabi and the meet and discussed the critical issues of the peace process. Of course, the both sides has draft document in terms of the peace negotiation, but bilateral meetings in terms of the high level of the leadership was quite enough important that that's why it needs to be identified in a historical meeting, a turning point in terms of the peace negotiation would open the doors for the future of the peace agreement.
I guess another very important element discussed during today's meeting is the building of trust between two nations. With such a complicated history, it's not an easy task. What are some practical confidence-building measures that could help in creating a more stable environment between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and how can these measures be implemented effectively?
First of all, of course, it's not easy, and it won't be easy because, as you mentioned, because of the historical background and the conflict and so on. But we need, as the President Aliyev mentioned in Shusha, that the region needs peace agreement. The Azerbaijan and Armenians' political will define in the future of the South Caucasus in terms of the peace agreement, because the peace agreement will bring the secure and peaceful environment not just to Azerbaijan and Armenia, to the rest of the region, so including Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. So that's why, first of all, it's quite enough important and priority for the future of the region. So back to the question, it's not easy to include citizens the understanding of the conflict and so on. But I think that yes, today's meeting quite enough important milestone in terms of the resolving of this the problem, because building the trust between two sides, because first of all, right after the Second Karabakh War, the Azerbaijan side that's why started the constructive way to propose the 5 articles, and then try to involve the Armenian side to the discussion at different platforms. But this is the conclusion of the 5 years of the war, and I think that it won't be difficult. It won't be difficult if Armenian the government will keep its the political will towards the bilateral meeting, direct dialogue, and one-on-one discussion.
So coming back to the economic cooperation, we spoke with you previously. Definitely, opening of Zenazer corridor, which can also follow the normalization of the process. It can open the door for economic collaboration between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So how do you think it can also help to cross the barriers, how it can help for two nations to start collaboration and to, with such a complicated history as we already spoke about?
That's why I mentioned that the Zenazer corridor needs to be identified, first of all, at the cooperation and integration in terms of economic relation between two nations, which is quite enough important, because as you mentioned, yes, we had both nations historical traumas, so because long-standing the conflict and so on. But the economic, the cooperation integration through the Zenazer corridor would facilitate the establishing of the the trust between two sides in terms of the high level of leadership and also the ordinary people, which is quite important. As you know, as we know, Azerbaijan has the willing in terms of this issue, because Azerbaijan started to declare its the willing right after the Second Karabakh War, and also in 2023, and Azerbaijan said that yes, we are ready to to open our door for the cooperation, integration, and so on. But has quite enough, of course, has quite clear the requirements in terms of border delimitation and constitutional amendments and getting the peace agreement. So that's why I think that yes, Zenazer corridor, which is the issue of the economic the cooperation and integration, will be able facilitate establishing of the peace and trust among the both sides nation.
So how might the normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia affect broader regional stability in the South Caucasus, are there any countries in the region that might either benefit or face challenges as a result of this diplomatic shift?
Yeah, I think that the getting the agreement, let's say in terms of Zenazer corridor, will be benefit for all sides in the region, not just in the region, as I mentioned before, 3+ and threats will include the Turkey, Russia, and Iran. So that's why the getting agreement, the Azerbaijani and the Armenian agreement will be quite enough important, because the normalization was one of the most important point of today's meeting between Azerbaijani and Armenian leadership and leadership. So which is quite enough to say important, because and also it's not possible to establish normalization through let's say the mediation or facilitation. So that's why the direct dialogue, or let's say mediator-free talk between the Azerbaijani and Armenian leadership is quite enough important and deserve to be identified as a turning point in terms of the peace negotiation process. So, conclusion. This process and Zenazer corridor will be the beneficial the point for the rest of the region, including the 3 nations of the region, and also the 3+3. But I think yes, the most important issue is that bringing and building trust and peace, normalization among the nations of the region is much more important through the Zenazer corridor, which is the integration and cooperation of the nations in terms of economic relation.
Is there any kind of role the global powers still can play in order to foster this process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, especially those who are the members of the European Union or the United States or any other global power who are willing to see the peaceful development in the region?
Of course, it can be said that yes, all the sides want peace, but the question is that what kind of peace? That's why, in order to get peace agreement, because peace is first of all important for the region. So, in order to get peace agreement, Azerbaijani and Armenian peace agreement, we needed the direct dialogue in terms of the high level of leadership. So. On the other side, of course, globally, yes, in terms of the USA or the European Union, or let's say even in terms of Turkey, and other sides, they want peace agreement. We witnessed the goodwilling in terms of towards the peace agreement, peace negotiation process. But however, the main issue, the based on Yerevan and Baku. And they are the political willing towards the peace negotiation process. So it needs to be started, the bilateral meeting without any mediation, without any facilitation, third parts intervention. Because, for example, we can say that yes, the globally the institutions, countries, organizations want to get to witness peace in the South Caucasus. But however, the decisive point will be based on the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians, the political willing towards a peace agreement. So this, and of course, this is today's meeting was a historic and turning point in terms of peace negotiation, but needs to be continued, as it has been mentioned by the experts or the policymakers anyway. So it needs to be continued and institutionalized, and also I hope that today's meeting would promote the practical work in terms of the respective the governments and states commissions in terms of the border delimitation and the constitutional amendments, which are the main issues in terms of the peaceful peace process.
Well, Professor Aliyev, thank you for joining our program today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today's context. The meeting between President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan in Abu Dhabi marks a crucial moment in the long and complex history of Azerbaijan and Armenia. While many questions remain, this dialogue offers a glimmer of hope for peace in the region that has seen decades of conflict. We'll continue to monitor the developments closely as both nations take their next steps toward normalization. Thank you for joining us, and see you soon.